Senate Finance Committee will come to order. I guess I should say, I was going to say member, but members, we have Senator Eaton, Senator Ingebrigtsen, and I believe Senator Benson is here. We are going to be doing the start of our omnibus bills today, and then we have a short bill from Senator Ralph. As we did in 2017 for Commerce and Energy, we'll review them today and take testimony and then be done with them. And then they'll be laid over until the jobs bill comes along, and then we'll take a motion to incorporate them into the larger omnibus bill. So you're first up, Senator Osmick, and the process is going to be similar to all the omnibus bills. We hear a short intro by the chair, a walk through the spreadsheet by fiscal analyst, some testimony from the commissioner, and we have Commissioner Kelly here for both bills, and then discussion and amendments. And I know, Senator Osmick, you have an amendment, but we'll wait on that until, of course, when we have a quorum, and then after you walk through the spreadsheet. So first up, we have Senate File 692. Senator Osmick, your omnibus energy bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senate File 1692 has a very small general fund appropriation. The majority of the money that is spent is either from the renewable development account or it is directly accessible to utilities. To go through the spreadsheet, I'll turn it over to Mr. Mumm.
Mr. Mumm.
Madam Chair and members, real brief walkthrough of the spreadsheet. On the first page, line 3 is an increase in the operating costs for the Public Utilities Commission. So to fund 2 FTEs to handle upcoming rate cases. That $600,000 increase for the biennium would be offset by the revenue on line 54 because the Public Utilities Commission would assess those costs to the utilities. The other changes are on lines 22 through 32, and these are all in Article 4 of the bill. They are the spending amounts from the renewable development account, and these are the same as the amounts that were in the bill that we heard in this committee 2 weeks ago, I think. Mm-hmm. So those are the amounts shown, and on page 2, there is an increase on line 45 from the Telecommunications Access Minnesota Fund for the Deaf, Blind, and Hard of Hearing Commission on Deaf, Blind, and Hard of Hearing Minnesotans, and those that's the summary of the changes and appropriations. On lines 55 through 57, there are some changes in Article 4 with the Renewable Development Account revenue. As a result of the CASC cap that's imposed, the amounts shown are the decreases in revenue relative to the forecast. And on line 56, that's an amount that Xcel Energy will be withholding for a third-party evaluator. That's currently a direct appropriated amount, but the bill changes it so that Xcel Energy just hangs on to that money instead. And that's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mumm. For the record, we do have a quorum. Members, I'm going to let you take a minute to get caught up on the fiscal sheet. I have seen this. I serve on Senator Osmick's committee, but it's fairly simple. Anything you'd like to point out, Senator Osmick, on the spreadsheet, just to get people caught up briefly?
I think there's 2 items I'd like to speak to. One was the increase at the Public Utilities Commission. I think our committee felt it was a warranted increase because of the complexity and the number of rate cases that are expected. The other increase that I thought was noteworthy was an increase in the deaf and blind assessment that actually goes into, that's on line 45, that goes into helping for people who are deaf and hard of hearing. We thought it was a worthy increase, and it was accessible back to utility users. Granted, it may only be a penny, but for these individuals, I think it was worthy of an increase. With that, members, I would accept some of the amendments. There's one of them I would not like to see go onto the bill, but I'm happy
Senator
to go
Osmick, we're not there yet, but we will be shortly. Mr. Naumann.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just think it bears mention, because we haven't done it yet, that the bill in front of you comes to the committee with a net zero general fund target for both items.
Thank you. Mr. Nauman. Ms. Fontaine, is there anything that you'd like to mention on this? No? No? Okay. And then I think we're going to ask Commissioner Kelly to come up, please. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Milne. Thank you, Ms. Fontaine. Commissioner Kelly, good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you and members for allowing me to be here this morning to share the department's thoughts on Senator Osmick's Omnibus Energy and Utilities Bill. I'm Steve Kelly. I'm the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Commerce. First, thanks to Chair Osmick and his staff for their work in putting this bill together. Although it's not identical to the governor's recommendations, we do appreciate the bill's inclusion of the Prairie Island Indian Communities Net Zero Project and a Solar on Schools program. Both those items were included in the governor's supplemental budget recommendations, but at differing levels of funding. Solar on Schools is important because nationally, energy costs are K-12 school districts' second highest operating budget expense after personnel. A Solar on Schools program would reduce electric utility bill costs through increased efficiency of operations and access to less costly energy through on-site solar energy production. We're also happy to see inclusion of the Prairie Island Indian Communities Net Zero Project. The Prairie Island Indian Community will be Minnesota's first net zero community, meaning it will generate as much energy as it consumes, and one of the first Indian nations in the United States to achieve that net zero goal. Despite being pleased with those two components, we are disappointed, though, that the bill does not include the governor's general fund budget requests for the department. One of those is the proposed reinstatement of the utility grid reliability assessment, which sunset on June 30th of last year and is critical for the continued operations of the Division of Energy Resources. The extension of this assessment had bipartisan support last year and was included in the Omnibus supplemental budget bill that was vetoed at the end of the 2018 session. This assessment provides funding for the department's participation in regional and federal electric and natural gas reliability oversight, ensuring adequate and secure generation and transmission resources to serve Minnesota's homes and businesses. The assessment is charged to electric utilities for the actual costs of providing regional and federal grid reliability. This initiative utilizes up to $500,000 in annual funding for ongoing work with the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, the Midwest Reliability Organization, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the Midwest Renewable Energy Tracking System, and other regional and federal agencies. And that work includes advocating on behalf of Minnesota's interests, ensuring adequate generation and other resources to serve Minnesota customers, using computer modeling for needed analyses and integrated resource plans, and joining with FERC on MISO petitions, and representing Minnesota in ongoing consumer complaints about high rates of return on equity on transmission resources. Without this assessment, the department has had to divert resources to complete the technical analysis needed to ensure the reliability of the state's electric system. The governor's budget also included $525,000 in fiscal year 20 for litigation costs pertaining to a lawsuit filed by the state of North Dakota against Minnesota's Next Generation Energy Act, which was passed by the legislature in 2007. In August 2018, the PUC and Commerce entered into a payment agreement with North Dakota and the other private companies to pay the attorney's fees and costs judgment. The PUC and Commerce have made an initial payment of $360,000 towards the judgment obligation, and the outstanding balance, about $1 million, must be paid by July 31st and is divided evenly between the two agencies. This change item is needed to pay these court-ordered legal fees without compromising the department's core services. We look forward to continuing to work with Chair Osmick as this omnibus bill progresses. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd be happy to answer any questions that members may have.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. Do we have any questions? Commissioner Kelly? We do have some written testimony in our packets, too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, excuse me, Senator Hayden.
Good. Well, thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioner Kelly. Just on that last point, I just want to get a better understanding. If for some reason you were unable to get the dollars that were appropriated for the lawsuit, what would be the result of that in your agency?
Commissioner Kelly.
Madam Chair, Senator Hayden, last year or last biennium, we were the only state agency that did not get an operating budget increase, and so we had to hold positions open. If we have to cover this with agency resources, it would mean that we would have to continue to hold those positions open or hold open additional positions, which would reduce our ability to serve Minnesotans.
Madam Chair, Senator, Commissioner Kelly, can you give us some specifics? What are the kind of positions that where are they in your organization? Where would the impact be felt to the citizens of Minnesota?
Madam Chair and Senator
Commissioner
Hayden, we've held positions open across the agency, including the Division of Energy Resources, in the Enforcement Division, where we work to protect Minnesotans against fraud or misconduct by a variety of our regulated entities. And I will just note that particularly in the energy area, where Senator Osmick's bill does provide funding for the Public Utilities Commission to provide 2 additional positions to deal with the 7 rate cases that are coming this year. Absence of this funding would handicap our ability to process those same 7 rate cases that will be before the Public Utilities Commission.
Senator Hayden, yeah. Commissioner Kelly, what is the total expense of the litigation, the North Dakota litigation to date, and what is expected?
Well, Madam Chair, the litigation is concluded, and we have the agreement to pay $1,050,000 remaining. And my understanding is that the Public Utilities Commission made the decision to pay that and then requested the positions that are in Senator Osmick's bill. We are asking for funding to pay our share of the remaining $525,000, or what $525,000 is our remaining share.
So your first comment, Commissioner Kelly, is you need to pay. There was a remaining comment that what is the total expense of the litigation?
Madam Chair, I guess it would have been the $1,050,000 plus the $360,000 advance payment that we've already made.
Okay, thank you.
And Madam Chair, that's the attorney's fee award. That is not, I don't want to imply that that was the whole cost involved in the lawsuit. That's the award that the court gave requiring the 2 agencies to pay the attorney's fees of North Dakota.
Mm-hmm. What year was that litigation, that lawsuit?
Madam Chair, it concluded last
12?
year, I believe.
Okay. For some reason, Commissioner, I thought we've been working on this for a very long time, on the North Dakota piece. Any further questions for the Commissioner? Oh, Senator Westrom.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Kelly, you referenced the tight budget constraints. Just a couple weeks ago, we had your deputy commissioner in here advocating for continuing to spend money on opposing Line 3. I might be able to suggest to you that with the overwhelming support and approval of that line replacement, maybe that'd be the first place your agency should reel in their spending and focus on things that would help consumers. You talked about helping consumers, certainly making sure we have reliable pipelines, which is the safest way to transport that energy for our consumers in Minnesota, would be a way to help them rather than try to continue to oppose that. So just a helpful hint that you guys could maybe prioritize where you're spending money if things are that short.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Westrom. Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Madam Chair.
Senator Osmic, you have an amendment, the A11 amendment before us. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would ask for an individual to propose the A11 amendment as a technical change, adding a couple of words.
We'll get that passed out. Nothing substantive on this amendment?
Not at all, and there's another technical change too in the A12 that needs to be dealt with.
Okay, we'll wait to have a motion on this.
Madam Chair,
Senator Osmic.
just in reference to what Senator Westrom said, the UTKE bill, which is the, while I'm not supposed to speak about policy, the UTKE bill is part of the policy section of this omnibus bill.
I'm sorry, Senator Osmic, what did you say?
That the UTKE bill, which is telling or defunding or telling the Department of Commerce that they cannot continue
Right.
to spend money on the appeal of Line 3 is part of this bill.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Senator Ingebrigtsen, would you like?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. I'd like to offer the A9 amendment.
A11. I'm sorry, we have the A11 before us.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, I have nothing. Sorry,
Senator-
I would offer that.
Okay.
I would offer the A11, I'm sorry.
Any questions to the A11 amendment? Senator Ingebrigtsen renews his motion on the A11 amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. Senator Osmic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The A12 amendment is also a small technical correction.
We are passing that out at this point, and what does it do?
Corrects some line numbering, adds in a couple of grammatical changes, nothing terribly substantive.
Okay, thank you. Already got it. Any questions on the A12 amendment? Senator Ingebrigtsen?
Madam Chair, I would move the A12 amendment.
All those in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. A12 is adopted. Senator Osmic, any other amendments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's an A10 amendment. This just changes one word in the solar incentive program. This is something that solar operators have made a request for, and I didn't see a problem with changing the word direct to alternating.
What page is that on?
That would be the that's in page 4, line 2. There's it's the solar energy incentive program.
Okay. Okay. Any questions on the A10 amendment? Senator Marty, would you like? Thank you for the motion on the A10 amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. A10 is adopted. Senator Osmic, anything else?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's the conclusion of the amendments that I would see added to this bill.
Great. Is there further amendments?
Madam Chair?
Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Madam Chair, I'd like to offer the A9 amendment.
Senator Ingebrigtsen moves the A9 amendment, and we will be passing that out. Thank you. Everyone has the amendment? Oh, no. Senator Ingebrigtsen to the A9 amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This amendment deals with and provides for a competitive process for grants to be to eligible communities in the state to use a plan to address economic and social impacts on communities of plant retirement or transition. Madam Chair and members, the grant program would support the local governments around who will face significant tax-based impacts as larger plants and their communities retire in the coming years. However, under the current language of the bill, only communities in the Xcel Energy Service territory would be eligible to participate. This amendment would ensure that all power plant communities are eligible to participate in the grant program, including the city of Fergus Falls, which I represent, where the Hoot Lake coal plant is scheduled for retirement in 2021. I talked it over with the author both yesterday and today, and we've had some discussions. And I know that there's concern about Xcel Energy folks paying for the for the power plants that are out of the district. And I also do know that last year the city of Benson, where the bio plant was shut down, that money was taken out of this account to assist that town out there when they shut down that biomass energy facility. So I know there's been a precedent set, and Madam Chair, that basically adds those rural communities, Fergus Falls, Cohasset, White Lakes, and Granite Falls, to the existing eligible area. That's what this does.
Thank you, Senator Ingebrigtsen. Senator Osmic to the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. While I appreciate the intentions of Senator Ingebrigtsen's amendment, I do have concerns that we are going to continue to fund items that are outside the ratepayer area. The bill that's being referred to is actually Senator Housley's bill, and it was specific to energy production within and plants that are retiring within the Xcel ratepayer area, and it's funds from the Renewable Development Account, which is from ratepayers inside the Xcel ratepayer area. Senator Ingebrigtsen references the Benson funding that came from the RDA. This is true, but keep in mind that the Xcel ratepayers were beneficiaries of the closure of that facility because we were paying an extraordinarily high amount per kilowatt hour for the energy that was coming off of there. And in order to exit the program and deal with the financial implications in Benson, it was thought that this RDA money would be helpful in helping Xcel ratepayers. So my preference would be that this not go on. It would be better that if we had funding from different sources. I'm not opposed to the philosophical direction. My problem is the funding direction that this comes from.
Madam Chair,
Senator Ingebrigtsen.
I do know this was Senator Housley's initiative to start, and I'm not sure through the process that this was taken out of the bill. These areas were taken out of the bill, and I just had heard most recently from my district, who does which is Otter Tail Power, that obviously knows that happened last year with Benson, and when that does happen, it does set a precedent. However, there are usual other reasons why these are done. You've stated those as well. So, Madam Chair, what I'll do now is, if I can get a commitment from the author of the bill to look at this further with both myself and Senator Housley, I would be more than willing to have those conversations and withdraw the A and I amendment.
Senator Ingebrigtsen withdraws the A9 amendment. Senator Osmic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate Senator Ingebrigtsen removing this. I certainly think if we can find a different funding mechanism, I think it's definitely something worth including. My philosophical direction is to try and keep this within the Excel ratepayer area, but I'm happy to work with the author to try and find that resolution, whether it be this session or next session.
Thank you, Senator Osbeck, and thank you, Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you.
Senator Westrom?
Madam Chair, and Senator Osmick, just so the discussion can have it as a part of it. I don't exactly know where your philosophical belief has come that the RDF is supposed to stay only within the Excel ratepayers. As one of the authors of the second Prairie Island bill, that is, the RDF came out of the original RDF or Prairie Island bill, and the second one modified it. But all along, that was never set up to only benefit the Excel ratepayers. The exchange was for this cask storage on site of their plants, which I was happy to carry, but I've heard this over and over, and I just want the record to reflect and you to have a little bit of that history. There is, the contemplation was not limited to Excel ratepayers when the legislation was passed and the account was set up. In fact, I know over the years they have funded many projects that would have been outside of the Excel ratepayers territory, which was proper and appropriate, because that was what the agreement and the intent was. It wasn't ever to limit it just to that sector of the territory. So I don't think that should hold you back, and I would hope you would hold look back to some of that agreement that put this in place in the first place. Wasn't intending to just leave it to the Excel ratepayers, because while I've got Excel in my district, I've got a lot of other territories, and many of us do, but we're all part of the state that's made this agreement with storage of the nuclear casks. And so I think there can be a good balance that doesn't just limit it to the Excel ratepayers. Certainly they've received a lot of it as well, and they should, but it wasn't ever contemplated that was the limitation of it. So just for the record, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Westrom. Senator Marty?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Westrom, it's true it may not have been just to Excel customers, but it was clearly for renewable development. And while I support efforts to address the concerns of these communities, none of them, including the ones in Excel territory, should the Renewable Development Fund be used to talk about how you deal with the community needs of these local communities. And when Senator Ingebrigtsen, when you had your amendment, you were talking about how we set a precedent in how we dealt with the biomass. The only thing coming out of the Renewable Development Fund for biomass is in this bill. Your precedent hasn't even happened yet, and you're saying, but it's a precedent now. And the whole point is none of that's renewable development. That should be coming out of other funds for shutting down power plants, when Excel customers, of which I'm one, when we benefited from the shutting down of the biomass plant, we ought to pay for the costs of it with the savings. Instead of saying we saved $330 million, we should say we saved $290 million. Senator Lang's bill ought to be funded out of something else, not out of this. And that's a big problem with this whole bill. We're rating renewable development account for things that have nothing to do with renewable development at a time when that's a very important part of Minnesota's future, Minnesota's industry, Minnesota's energy policy. We're taking money out of it for things that don't deserve that funding.
Thank you. Senator Marty? Okay, just any further discussion on 1692? Senator Marty.
Madam Chair, on the rest of the bill, I'll just speak briefly to it. Very disappointed in many provisions of it. When we're getting back to the Renewable Development Fund, among other things, this bill raids 200 and some million from the fund by the cap on casks, which is done at a time when there's no progress being made on how to deal with the waste. It takes away that $200 million, plus it uses it for things like, again, Senator Lang's bill. I support supported funding for the loggers and truckers that were not made whole, that were harmed by shutting down that plant, but that shouldn't come out of renewable development again. And there are huge problems with other parts of the bill. I have concerns, great concerns about the SIP changes in the bill from some of the munis and co-ops. They were working on some changes that I think would benefit their members, and yet here it's just undercutting it and taking away a big chunk of what has been done in the past. I have very great concerns. Apparently the CERTS funding, they were assessed a small amount to help pay for the CERTS programming. I think many of us are familiar with. That was good work, and this takes away the requirements that they fund that. That's just one small part of the SIP program thing, and I think it's taking away conservation programs and saying, okay, instead of that, you can use solar and other things that weren't intended for it. And in this, I looked at the amendment you offered earlier, Senator Osmick, and I see that you corrected it. It looked like a mistake in terms of it, where you were saying they'd only have to do SIP on the renewable portion of their expenditures. Now it sounds like you're doing the opposite. They only have to do SIP on the non-renewable portion, and I don't understand the logic of that. It seems to me conservation is important on all of their energy, and we ought to be funding it that way. There are a whole range of problems with this bill, but the biggest thing I'd say about it is that it is taking away, not only through the cap on casks, but also on all these little payments, the host community thing, which has nothing to do with renewables, the biomass compensation for the truckers. Those are good things to do, but they shouldn't be coming out of the Renewable Development Fund, and I have strong concerns and urge the committee to reject the bill.
Thank you, Senator Murray. Further comments? Senator Eaton.
Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a few questions for Senator Osmick on his, on lines 4.26, 4.27, there's a 25 megawatt cap on the Community Solar Garden program. Where did you come up with this number?
Senator Osmick.
Madam Chair, Senator Eaton, that is in discussions with solar developers as well as with Xcel Energy. It's also based upon what other states have been doing. I thought 25 was a good starting point. I don't believe that when we get to negotiating with the other body that the 25 is going to stay. I think 25 is a very reasonable amount, considering the amount, the cost, Senator Eaton, of community solar garden energy that flows onto the system. I know you haven't been in my committee, but we have, our committee has been very seriously concerned about the costs that we are incurring. Community solar gardens are running approximately $120 to $140 a megawatt hour, compared to industrial solar, which runs at about $40 to $50 a megawatt hour, which compares to fossil fuels and wind that are down at about $7. So you can tell that the energy that's pouring on, and it is completely unfiltered. What if community solar gardens build, we must purchase. There is no choice. And the way the community solar garden language is written, the request that is made through the PUC from community solar garden builders, they have to accept it, and based upon their financeability, bring the energy onto the grid. So having a reasonable cap at 25, I thought was a very good starting point. I know that some solar developers wanted something more like 175 megawatts. I thought that was extraordinarily high. So I think as we go through the process, we're going to find a happy medium, but I wanted to start at a spot I thought was reasonable and move from there.
Senator Eaton, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, Senator Osmick, as actually the chief author of this community solar bill, I thought it was written quite clearly and well. There are, right now, I mean, do you know how much community solar has brought into the grid last year?
Senator Osmick.
Not specifically. I could certainly have Xcel Energy come up and give you a historical perspective of how much has gone on every year. I believe it was over 100 megawatts in the last year, and that's projected to happen again. But Senator Eaton, I don't believe for 1 minute that this body thought that it should be so unregulated as to purchase at 3 times the amount of rate that we can get solar energy from a utility scale array. I think that's rather unprudent of us to tax our constituents, particularly in the ratepayer area, Excel ratepayer area, for that high level of energy when we could purchase it at a third of the price in a different manner and still get solar energy on the grid.
Madam Chair? Well, I don't know if you're aware, but in a lot of the United States, solar jobs have gone down, but in Minnesota, they've gone up 48%, and over 4,000 jobs last year. So if we're cutting from 200 to 25 megawatts, won't companies go out of business and jobs be lost?
Senator Osmond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Eaton, well, keep in mind that we are one of the only states without a cap. That's why the jobs have been flowing and the amount of money has been flowing into Minnesota, and we are paying an extraordinarily high amount of money for those particular facilities. Do I think that jobs will be lost? Well, considering the fact that there is a very delayed fuse to start this program, I think that the solar garden industry will continue much more locally as opposed to a lot of nationals coming in, harvesting money from Minnesota and leaving.
Madam Chair, Senator Osmick, I think this bill is ill-advised. I believe that the other forms of energy that you're citing damage our environment and are contributing to the crisis we're in as far as our as climate change goes, and pursuing solar is something that doesn't add carbon to the atmosphere and is a very environmental thing to do. So I'm very disappointed at this part of your bill.
Senator Osmick, I came in a little late to your presentation, but I'm a little concerned. I have a side question, not specific to this bill, but it does have a little bit of bearing on it. All of our demographic indicators are saying that we're going to gain sizable population in the Twin Cities area and elsewhere in the state of Minnesota in the next 15 to 20 years. Upwards of over 800,000 people. That's going to affect our energy draw. And quite honestly, I don't know if we have the baseline power in order to keep everyone in power in this state. Take, for example, just what happened this last winter when power companies were saying everyone should turn down their thermostats to 62 degrees when the temperature was sub-zero. And I get a little concerned about people that live in a northern state like this, that it seems to me like there's not enough power to go around right now. And we keep relying on the promise of new technologies and alternative energy, but I haven't seen where that type of energy source can replace or satisfy the draw that's going to be necessary in the near future. Is there any plans to put perhaps a more traditional but modernized power plant in the state of Minnesota in the near future, such as a nuclear power or something else that's powered, a gas-powered power plant?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Limmer, inside of this bill, which I've not spoken to most of the policy provisions, one policy provision is the lifting of the nuclear moratorium. I believe that we do need to deal with those 3 reactors that we have, whether that is an extension on their existing licenses, which is currently being discussed, or the possibility of flat out replacing them. And I certainly would hope that if we replace anything at Prairie Island, that we move it off the reservation area so that we no longer continue to have to deal with that situation. You are exactly correct that as we bring more renewables onto the system, as we may believe that to be a very good thing, and in many cases it is, it creates an issue regarding stability. Well, you just discussed the polar vortex. All of our windmills shut down. Now there are new blades that are being created where they will be able to generate beyond -22 degrees. But when you talked about that turning your thermostat down issue, that was because we had natural gas peakers that were kicked on because of the loss of the renewables on the grid. I don't disagree with you at all that we need to have baseload generation. And one thing that we listened to in committee was when MISO came in to discuss how, as we bring up to 40% renewables, how we suddenly create a transmission issue, particularly in the western part of the state. There's a heat map that shows as you increase renewables, you increase the transmission problems, particularly in districts such as Senator Westrum's. So I do have concerns, but keep in mind that we are under an integrated resource plan type of design, and Xcel Energy this year is going to be producing their next 5-year plan. My hope is we're going to start talking about those nuclear reactors, because that is baseload generation we have to keep the lights on. So I don't disagree with you, but that comes down to the utility and our friends of the Public Utility Commission to determine what's the correct mix.
Thank you. Okay. Final comments, Senator Osmick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the discussion. I would only point out that this bill, while now amended, did exit my committee with a 9-to-1 vote. It was very bipartisan in nature and very well supported by both sides of the political aisle, and I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Senator Osmick. Senate File 6092 as amended is laid over. Thank you. Senator Dames. Welcome, Senator Dames.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and members. Senate File 2474 is the Omnibus Commerce Budget Bill. Our fiscal analyst will run through it line by line here, but I'd like to give some of our highlights. We had a zero target, so we're refunding the division within our jurisdiction at the base level. We're redirecting some additional fees in the department's financial institution special reserve account, as well as increasing some of the funding for healthcare fraud enforcement division. The department committed to working with stakeholders on language modifying the real estate appraiser regulations, and this bill agreed upon provisions are included in this bill with a small appropriation for the Real Estate Advisory Board. We did not include the governor's proposed changes. Those are some of the highlights. And at this point, I'll have Mr. Mumm run through the financials in the bill along with Section 1 and 2.
Thank you, Senator Dames. Mr. Mumm, to the spreadsheet, please. Thank you.
Madam Chair and members, going through the spreadsheet from the top, to the department's financial institutions division, there is a reduction on line 4 of $840,000 over the biennium for operating expenses. If you flip to the second page on line 51 and 52, sorry, there is a redirection of some fees that are currently generate revenue from mortgage originator and money transmitter licensing. These are currently deposited into the general fund as undedicated revenue, and this bill would redirect those revenues into the financial institutions account, which the financial institutions division is appropriated and uses to cover their operating expenses. So that's the interplay between the operating cost reduction on line 4 and the revenue on line 52. On line 5 is a reduction of $800,000 for the Financial Services Inclusion Program, also known as Prepare and Prosper. Going down further into the Administrative Services Division, on line 17, there's a reduction of $66,000 over the biennium for rulemaking for Minvest. On line 18 is an increase of $10,000 over the biennium, and this is to compensate the Real Estate Appraisal Advisory Board. That is a change that is contained in Article 3 of the bill, and this would just compensate members of that board. On line 23 in the Enforcement Division is an increase of $566,000 in the first biennium and $596,000 in the second biennium. for healthcare enforcement. The department receives and investigates claims of health insurance fraud, and this would allow that activity to be increased. In the insurance division on line 36, there is an increase of $30,000 for the biennium to cover 2 years of membership to the National Council of Insurance Legislators. And finally, on page 2, I briefly touched on it already, but on lines 51 and 52 are the revenue changes associated with the financial institutions account. This is contained in Article 2, Section 1 of the bill. That's the fiscal implication. The only other item is that in Article 2, Section 2, there's a limitation on the assessment that the department can levy on financial institutions for revenue into the financial institutions account, which has there currently is not. So that's a summary of the spreadsheet and the fiscal impact of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Mumm. Mr. Mumm, I have a question for you or Senator Dames. Is that financial or healthcare enforcement? It's only $500,000, but is that new? Is that steady? Is it usually about $500,000 a year? Has it gone up?
Sure. Madam Chair, it's not new. It's in the base at $558,000 a year. So it would increase to $1,124,000, so roughly doubling the appropriation over the biennium.
So it's going up because we need more money. Interesting. Questions? Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question, too, regarding the line 23, the healthcare enforcement, and I believe you said that that was additional funding to, in the case of insurance fraud, to perhaps stop, prevent, deter insurance fraud. Where is the, I know the Commerce Department is where our constituents go if they feel that they've been wronged by an insurance company. Where is that type, what line item, or where are the funds that provide services for constituents who feel that they have been treated unfairly or unjustly or illegally by their insurance company?
Senator Dames.
Madam Chair, that would be line 22 under the operating cost.
Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So who's the point person under operating costs for a consumer who has a concern about an insurance company's treatment of their claims or policy?
Senator Dames.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senator Nelson. I would assume it would be the Department of Insurance under the Commerce Department, but when Commissioner Kelly comes up, we could ask him that question as to who he directs that to.
Thank you. I'll save my questions for Commissioner Kelly.
Yes, Senator Newman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Mumm and Senator Dames, line 67, there's a rulemaking change. Looks like a savings of, or a small amount of savings. Could you explain that a little bit more and maybe direct me into the bill as to where it's covered?
Senator Dames.
Sure. Madam Chair, Senator Newman, it will not be in the bill because it's an appropriation that is being discontinued, zeroed out, so that rider no longer exists. Previously, it was a rider in the bill that just appropriated $33,000 a year for rulemaking associated with Minvest. And I'm afraid I'm not prepared to speak eloquently on what Minvest, what exactly that would entail.
Senator Newman.
Madam Chair, Mr. Mumm, thank you for that explanation. That's just fine.
Great. Great. Thank you. I think we'll have Commissioner Kelly come up. Oh, Mr. Stain, do you have anything that you would like to say?
Madam Chair, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Kelly. Members, there's some few other pieces of testimony in your packets too, while the commissioner's coming up. Commissioner Kelly.
Madam Chair and members, for the record again, I'm Steve Kelly, the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Commerce. I want to thank Chair Dames and the Commerce Committee members for including the compromise language that's found in Article 3 of the bill. The department was able to work with the North Star chapter of the Appraisal Institute to come to agreement on policy language that worked for both the department and their organization. We hope that spirit of compromise and negotiation will continue as this bill moves forward. While the department is disappointed that the governor's budget recommendations are not included in the bill, we stand ready to work with Chair Dames as we move forward in the budget process. Specifically, the investments made in the governor's recommendations that were not included in this bill would allow Commerce to increase its operating budget. As I mentioned earlier, we're the only agency of state government that did not get an operating budget adjustment in the previous biennium, and so an increase in our budget budget for the coming biennium was essential for our central services and reducing the effect of inflationary cost pressures on the day-to-day functions of the department, including an increase in our rent. Also, the governor proposed modernizing our IT systems. I recognize that there are risks related to any investments in IT systems, but there are also risks in leaving outdated systems in place, and our access databases are in 2003, 2007 era, and it's time to update those databases. We also propose an unclaimed property system modernization and cybersecurity upgrade. This department operates the state's unclaimed property system, and to put it on a sustainable path, we need to modernize the system that supports that, including making sure that we are able to protect the privacy of property owners or claimants in the system. We also proposed a policy modernization related to unclaimed property by bringing the law into the 21st century. This item would have funded new staff who would work with Minnesota consumers and businesses and reduce claims processing times for consumers so they get their property back faster. We also had a proposal for litigation costs. Needed to pay court-ordered legal fees without compromising the department's core services. I would also add that the department has concerns with the cap on the financial institutions assessment that is found in Article 2, Section 2 of the bill, and how that would affect the department's ability to safely regulate state-chartered financial institutions. The department hopes that it can work with the chair, members, and stakeholders on this section of the bill. As I said, we look forward to continuing to work with Chair Dames and stakeholders as the bill progresses. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can you tell me about the Safe Light case, litigation expenses?
Madam Chair, the department brought an action related to the replacement of auto glass, and in the course of entering into a consent order, Safe Light felt that consent or decree violated their rights, so they sued the department, and the court, I think there was as a result of the decision in that case, the court ordered attorney's fees be paid. The department appealed that award of attorney's fees, and this spring the appeals court affirmed the award of attorney's fees.
Okay, thank you. Is there further questions for the commissioner? Senator Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, I just would like to follow up on my question about consumer protection in regards to insurance claims, concerns, and I understood that that's under the operating costs aspect of the budget. And what is the point person or the point area when a constituent is concerned that something regarding their insurance has not been handled properly?
Commissioner Kelly.
Madam Chair and Senator Nelson, we have a consumer support center that operates as a first point of contact for most consumers. Then we also have an enforcement division, and the enforcement division works with consumers who do have concerns about failure by a company to pay claims in an appropriate way, or other transactions that they think are improper, to investigate those concerns expressed by consumers and then take action with respect to the claims.
Thank you. Just follow. And so, Commissioner, all of those entities are under the operating budget?
Commissioner Kelly.
Madam Chair and Senator Nelson, the enforcement division and the consumer support center are in, I believe, in what we would consider our administrative services area. We have separate categories for the financial institutions for the Energy Resources Division.
Just a final comment. You know, insurance is complicated. They're complicated products. They're the law of big numbers, actuarial, science, and then all the contract language. And I know that our contract language is supposed to be written in maybe a 6th grade or 7th grade level, but let me just tell you, those contracts are complicated. And I hear from constituents on a somewhat regular basis regarding concerns with their insurance. Excuse me. And I just want to note that my hope is that as we go forward, that we'll be sure that our constituents still have those resources necessary that your department will still have those necessary resources to help our constituents understand or continue to look at the insurance contracts and how those are being handled for them, or in the case of their claims.
Commissioner Kelly.
Madam Chair and Senator Nelson, I just felt I should explain something else. So we have an insurance division in the department, and the insurance division's responsibility is to look at that initial language as well as the proposed rates. So there's a group in the department that looks at these issues on the front end, I would say, and then if consumers do have complaints, then the enforcement divisions and other groups in the department look at the issues on the back end. And I share your concern that we have sufficient resources so that we can continue to protect Minnesotans.
Thank you. Senator Marty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Related to the last comment of the Commissioner, yes, if there aren't adequate resources, I assume you do have trouble with this. I guess I had a question for Senator Dames about Article 2, Section 2, which Commissioner pointed out. The assessments on financial institutions for regulating them are capped at the previous year's level, and this is in state law permanently. Are you thinking 5 years from now, 10 years from now, they can regulate with the same amount of money they have now?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senator Marty. You know, as legislation goes on, that can always be changed, but at this point we want to get zero in on some of these fees that are being charged and try to kind of slow this process down. It's, I don't like the fact that we can just go to the well and just change these fees, and I think we need to do something to kind of get a handle on some of these fees. That don't mean down the road future legislators can't change that, but at this point I would like to see that 100% stay in the bill.
Senator Marty.
Madam Chair, I think this is the kind of thing that's easy to think is a smart fix to some problem, but I think this is the kind of thing that causes problems down the road. And just as Senator Nelson was talking about constituents concerned about insurance rates and are they being regulated well and everything else, this is going to cause more problems in the future on financial institutions. It's short-sighted. And I really see very strange that we're going to permanently lock in statute. And yes, we can change statute. You know how sometimes things take several years to change. I just think it's strange to lock into law that the fees are going to be, the assessments are going to be the same next year as the previous year and do that in perpetuity.
Senator Benson, to this point.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Commissioner Kelly, with regard to Senator Marty's question, the limitations on assessments, can you automatically increase those?
Commissioner Kelly.
Or do you have to go through the legislative process?
Madam Chair and Senator Benson, we have authorization to do assessments to reflect actual costs related to our supervision of financial institutions. And so we do have, there are a variety of rules in the statute regarding how we go about doing that assessment, but we do not, as I understand it, have to come back to the legislature for authorization for an increase in assessments.
Senator Benson.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Kelly, so if this law went into effect, you could come back and demonstrate the expenses related to monitoring financial institutions and ask for a fee increase. We do that with medical boards and other licensing boards, and so I think this language just aligns with standard practice in other licensing and regulatory facilities. So, Commissioner, I don't think we're tying your hands. I think we're just making you come to the legislature and demonstrate.
Commissioner Kelly.
Madam Chair and Senator Benson, I would just respectfully disagree with regard to the tying of the department's hands. But
Senator Benson.
I understand
Madam
the point
Chair,
you made.
Commissioner Kelly, we tie a lot of people's hands, and we expect the Board of Medical Practice to come back. We expect the CPAs to come back. And so if we're going to expect all of those folks to come and demonstrate, even the Board of Pharmacy, when they need new software, has to come back, even though it might be a reasonable expense for their operations. And so I think this is just good alignment. Thank you, Senator Dames.
Thank you. Further questions for Commissioner Kelly? Thank you very much, Commissioner. Very good to see you. Okay, discussion on 2474. Senator Dames, final comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Appreciate the time to share this with you, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Dames. And with that, we are going to lay Senate File 2474. We're going to lay that over. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Melm. Now we have Senator Ralph. House File 679. It's our Children's Residential Treatment Payment Provisions Effective Date Modification. Welcome, Senator Ralph. Members, there is a fiscal note in your packet, I believe. In your packet or being passed out? Okay.
It's in the packet. It references Senate File 1131. I think you've got the House file.
Right. Okay. Yeah, members, the fiscal note is referenced to Senate File 1131, but we do have House File 679 before us. And members, they chose a one-time $368,000 in fiscal year 2019. Senator Ralph, to your bill, and why are we spending $368,000?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The reason for this is that because of a timing problem that existed in the previous budget cycle, we have a 2-month gap in the support of the children's residential mental health facilities. These facilities treat severely mentally ill children who require 24/7 care and treatment. They receive individualized treatment to stabilize crisis, develop skills to return to the community, improve family and social functioning, and receive mental health. It was the intention of the original funding that this would continue on through the cycle through June of 2019, but because the way it cut off, CMS will no longer be funding this during that 2-month period. So this will fall upon the counties. And so this is simply a way to relieve them. It's $368,000 one-time money that would be used to continue this program until the new cycle kicks in. So it's something to continue the programs so that these children are not left in a totally unstable situation. The counties have not provided for the financing of this because they didn't expect to have to. And so there's a very uncertain potential that these children might have a place to stay, and so that's the reason for this. And I don't need to get into the weeds on it. I think this probably is pretty straightforward proposal.
Senator Ralph, so this $368,000 is paying for May and June, is that correct?
I'm sorry.
Is this $368,000 funding May and June? Is that
that's correct.
Thank you,
Madam Chair.
Senator Hayden.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and Senator Ralph, for bringing the bill. It is really, really important that we do this. It is going to be extremely disruptive for those young people who are really, really in need of services. So this IMD issue, Madam Chair, as you know, has been something that's somewhat imposed on us from the federal government in terms of the lack of funding that they traditionally gave us. We've worked something out on the substance abuse disorder side along the ways of waivers. However, the Center for Medicaid Services is not inclined to work this out with us. So this funding, I will just have to say, is critical to keep those young people who are already really ill from being disrupted even more.
Senator Benson, do you have comments? Okay, thank you. Further comments on that? Yes, Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Ralph, thank you for bringing this. I just have one question, though, and that is the underlying action. Why were 45% of our Rule 5 beds declared IMDs? What was significant about that that led to this ruling, then, that has led to this need for funding to make up for what the feds have declared? Was it the feds that declared them IMDs, or was it the state health department?
Madam Chair and Senator Nelson, I believe it was the federal government, and I cannot tell you, I have no clue why they did this. Someone else closer to the CMS might understand what happened, but they just apparently decided to arbitrarily assign a bed limitation, and that's what happened. I think this happened in some other areas as well, as I understand it. Some of the other facilities, they have restricted the number of beds that they are willing to pay for. So that's what's happening here. And as I say, I want to be able to determine what the federal government does in any direction at this point.
Thank you.
Yes, Senator Nelson.
Madam Chair, Senator Ralph, yes, it's always hard to determine what's happening, but at the federal level. But what I did want to just note is if it's that the beds were capitated at the federal level, or if there's something in the way that we have our Rule 5 beds set up that led to this determination. We don't have to answer this today, but I think it's important for us to know why this rule, why our beds were affected in this way, just to know for the future, so we can avoid perhaps this type of action again.
Exactly. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
And Senator Benson.
Briefly, DHS has been aware of this for a while, and they're moving to something called a PRTF to deal with these kids, which would be eligible for federal funding. The transition had a couple hiccups. I don't want to unfairly mischaracterize, but the transition is not necessarily easy. It's something that we're going to have to cooperate with DHS in order to get these facilities eligible to draw down federal funds. I'm hoping that can happen faster than it appears to be happening. Otherwise, we will, in order to keep the counties whole, have an investment in the combined health and human services budget to cover ongoing funding of IMDs. And so really the transition will determine if this committee sees a much bigger cost going forward.
Thank you, Senator Benson. Senator Ralph, is this cost just for the counties that have the beds available?
This would be for the treatment facilities that are in existence. I believe there's 11 of them.
11, okay, thank you. And members, just FYI, this will be coming off the bottom line. and we need to get this done. So any further questions? Okay. Senator Hayden, would you like to move this bill? Senator Hayden moves that House File 679 be recommended pass and placed on general orders. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam
Senator
Chair.
Ralph. So members, we have a meeting tomorrow. We are going to be working on the Veterans Omnibus Bill and Agriculture and Housing. Senator Westrom, your bill is up tomorrow morning. So thank you, members. Meeting is adjourned.